Infidelity does not always arrive with chaos. More often, it enters softly, almost politely, rearranging the emotional furniture of a marriage before anyone can name what feels different. It is not the act itself that first reveals the rupture, but the atmosphere that follows it. A temperature change in the room. A pause where warmth used to live. A presence that feels both near and unreachable at the same time. When a wife crosses the invisible line of betrayal, something fundamental shifts inside her long before words can explain it. She may still show up. She may still care for daily rituals. But the emotional choreography changes. Eye contact lingers differently. Silences grow heavier. Conversations lose their ease. What once felt mutual now feels negotiated. And the partner senses it, not intellectually, but viscerally. One of the earliest and most unsettling shifts after infidelity is emotional distance, not dramatic withdrawal but a quiet, almost imperceptible retreat that alters the emotional climate of the relationship. It often begins subtly. She may still speak kindly, still participate in routines, still fulfill responsibilities, yet something essential feels missing. Her presence becomes thinner, less textured, as though part of her has stepped back while her body remains. This distance is rarely intentional cruelty, it is a psychological adjustment. After crossing an internal boundary, she must create space to hold the contradiction of being committed and having betrayed that commitment. Emotional closeness threatens to expose that fracture, so distance becomes a form of emotional self-preservation. What makes this shift so confusing for the partner is that it does not arrive with explanation. There is no announcement, no argument, no obvious reason. Instead, intimacy slowly loses its spontaneity. Conversations feel managed rather than natural. Affection feels measured. She listens, but not with the same emotional availability. The partner may sense something has changed yet struggle to define it, leading to self-doubt and confusion. This distance is also a way of regulating guilt. When emotional proximity increases, so does the discomfort of holding a secret. Pulling away lessens that discomfort. Eye contact shortens. Physical closeness becomes practical rather than expressive. The warmth that once flowed effortlessly now feels conditional, as if intimacy must be curated to avoid scrutiny. Even moments of laughter can feel strangely hollow, because part of her awareness is always elsewhere. At the same time, this distance can carry an undercurrent of restlessness. She may appear distracted, impatient, or preoccupied, not because of dissatisfaction with her partner alone, but because she is managing an internal split. One part of her is present, performing normalcy. Another part is elsewhere, carrying excitement, guilt, fear, and secrecy. Maintaining this duality requires emotional energy, and that energy is often taken from the relational bond. The partner feels this as absence rather than rejection, which makes it harder to confront. There is no clear offense, only a growing sense of emotional loneliness. She may justify this withdrawal internally by telling herself she needs space, clarity, or independence, but underneath it lies the need to protect the hidden part of herself. Distance creates safety, not because she feels unsafe with her partner, but because closeness risks exposure. This subtle emotional separation is often the first signal that something fundamental has shifted, a quiet tremor beneath the surface that suggests the relationship is no longer being inhabited fully by both people at the same time. After infidelity, one of the most profound psychological shifts is the quiet rewriting of the relationship's past. This does not happen as a conscious lie but as an internal narrative adjustment, a way for the mind to reduce the tension between behavior and identity. When someone sees themselves as loyal, caring, or moral yet acts in a way that contradicts those values, the psyche searches for balance. To restore that balance, the story of the marriage often changes. Moments that were once remembered as stable or loving are suddenly reinterpreted as lonely, restrictive, or disappointing. What was once "we were happy" becomes "I was already unhappy." This reframing allows the betrayal to feel less like a rupture and more like a consequence. In this process, neutrality disappears. Ordinary conflicts from the past are magnified, while tenderness is minimized or forgotten entirely. She may begin to recall feeling unseen for years, misunderstood in ways she never voiced, or unfulfilled long before the affair occurred. These feelings may contain partial truths, but their timing is significant. They emerge not as an invitation to repair, but as an explanation for separation. The mind reaches backward to justify a present reality it is not yet willing to fully name. This reinterpretation often shows up in conversation as quiet criticism or revisionist comments. She may speak of the marriage with a new tone, one that carries disappointment rather than partnership. Statements feel absolute, as though conclusions have already been reached. The past is no longer a shared memory but a contested territory. When her partner challenges these recollections, it can escalate tension, not because the facts are being debated, but because the narrative itself is serving an emotional purpose. To undo it would be to reopen guilt. What makes this especially painful is that her partner may begin to question their own memory. When someone you love reframes your shared history with such confidence, doubt sneaks in. You wonder if you missed something, if the relationship was weaker than you believed. This doubt often silences confrontation, allowing the new narrative to solidify further. This rewriting is also a distancing mechanism. By emphasizing dissatisfaction, she creates emotional permission to step away. It becomes easier to justify less effort, less vulnerability, less repair. If the story of the marriage is one of chronic lack, then emotional withdrawal feels reasonable, even necessary. Yet underneath this revised history is often a fear of facing desire honestly. Infidelity exposes wants that may feel destabilizing to acknowledge within the marriage. Rewriting the past offers safety. It shifts focus from the complexity of desire to the simplicity of blame. Not because the marriage was perfect, but because confronting longing without scapegoating the past requires a level of emotional courage many people are not ready to claim. After infidelity, guilt rarely appears as softness or remorse. More often, it masks itself as irritation, defensiveness, or an almost startling reactivity. This is one of the most confusing responses for a partner, because instead of tenderness or accountability, there is tension. Questions feel intrusive. Curiosity is met with impatience. Ordinary remarks spark disproportionate responses. The emotional logic beneath this is not cruelty, but self-protection. Guilt thrives on avoidance, and defensiveness is a shield that keeps uncomfortable truths at a distance. When someone carries a secret that conflicts with how they want to see themselves, the nervous system remains on alert. Even neutral conversations can feel threatening, because exposure always feels just one question away. This creates a state of emotional hypervigilance. She may interpret harmless observations as accusations or red suspicion where none is spoken. In that charged state, irritation becomes a release. It pushes the other person back and restores a sense of control. The anger is not really about the comment being made, but about the fear of being seen. Defensiveness also reverses the emotional roles within the relationship. Instead of feeling like the one who crossed a line, she may unconsciously position herself as the one under attack. This shift allows guilt to be externalized rather than felt internally. If she can frame herself as pressured, misunderstood, or judged, the focus moves away from her internal conflict. Her partner's confusion or concern becomes framed as criticism, even when it is gentle. This dynamic can leave the other person feeling hesitant to speak, unsure of what is safe to ask, slowly walking on emotional eggshells. Another layer of this defensiveness is the resistance to sitting with vulnerability. True remorse requires emotional exposure, admitting harm, tolerating discomfort, and allowing the other person's pain to exist without control. For someone not prepared to face that depth, irritation offers an escape route. It shuts down conversations that might lead to accountability. Short answers, sarcasm, or cold detachment become tools to end discussion before it reaches threatening territory. This tension can create a paradoxical intimacy rupture. The partner seeking closeness through understanding finds only walls. Over time, they may internalize the defensiveness as rejection, believing they are the problem for asking or feeling too much. Meanwhile, the unspoken guilt remains unresolved, expressed only in sideways forms. The louder the defensiveness, the more it signals what cannot be said directly. In these moments, anger is not evidence of strength or certainty, but of emotional overload. It points to a struggle between self-image and reality, between secrecy and connection. Until that struggle is acknowledged internally, guilt will continue to speak through irritation, protecting the hidden truth by pushing away the very empathy that might make honesty possible after betrayal. One of the most noticeable shifts in a wife's behavior is a heightened focus on autonomy, privacy, and personal boundaries. This change does not necessarily signal detachment from the relationship itself, but rather an unconscious attempt to manage the internal tension caused by crossing an emotional or moral boundary. She begins to guard her time, her thoughts, and even small decisions more closely, not out of malice, but because maintaining secrecy and self-protection requires control over her own space. Everyday routines that were once shared freely may become compartmentalized. She may spend more time alone, retreat to private spaces, or insist on doing certain activities independently. This is often accompanied by a subtle defensiveness around questions or curiosity, as though each inquiry threatens to reveal more than she is ready to disclose. It is a careful choreography, balancing the life she maintains within the marriage with the life she has begun to experience outside it. Privacy becomes a form of safety. She may become more attentive to her phone, her social interactions, or her digital footprint. Conversations may shift from openness to guardedness, with answers that are shorter, more measured, or strategically vague. Even when her intentions are not malicious, this behavior can feel like withdrawal to her partner, creating a sense of emotional distance that is difficult to articulate. The drive for autonomy is often coupled with subtle testing of limits, exploring how much independence she can claim without confrontation. It is a paradoxical stance. She seeks closeness and affirmation from her partner, but only on terms that do not jeopardize the secret she carries. This focus on boundaries also reflects a need to regain internal equilibrium. When she has acted against her own moral compass, the mind seeks ways to reconcile the dissonance. Establishing control over her personal space is one method of managing anxiety and preserving self-image. Every moment she claims as solely hers is a moment in which she can align her inner world with her actions without immediate scrutiny or judgment. For the partner, these changes may be subtle at first: a reluctance to share, a sudden insistence on privacy, or a new rigidity in routines. Over time, they can feel like walls being erected where previously there were none. This is not always intentional exclusion. It is an unconscious protective mechanism designed to reduce the risk of exposure, to manage guilt, and to navigate the emotional complexity of divided loyalty. At its core, the heightened focus on autonomy is a reflection of the tension between desire and responsibility, between secrecy and connection, and between personal agency and relational accountability. It is a behavioral signal, often misread as coldness or rejection, but it speaks more to an internal struggle, a need to balance conflicting impulses, and a careful negotiation of self-preservation within the context of intimacy. One of the most complex and paradoxical behaviors a wife may exhibit after infidelity is the simultaneous desire for closeness and the compulsion to pull away. This tension is not rooted in contradiction for its own sake, but in the internal conflict that arises when intimacy collides with secrecy and guilt. On one hand, she craves the reassurance, familiarity, and comfort that the marital bond provides. On the other, being fully present emotionally feels dangerous because it risks exposure of the hidden truth. This push and pull creates an oscillation in behavior that is confusing, frustrating, and emotionally disorienting for both partners. Affection may be offered selectively, warmth and attention appear in bursts, only to retreat as quickly as they arrived, leaving the partner wondering whether they are witnessing genuine connection or a carefully managed performance. This paradox is intensified by the cognitive load of maintaining a secret. Keeping an affair concealed requires constant vigilance, monitoring communication, managing schedules, and controlling conversations. Emotional closeness threatens to pierce that carefully constructed bubble. The more she feels loved or trusted, the more vulnerable she becomes to being discovered. As a result, she may unconsciously create distance, interrupting intimacy before it grows too deep, or deflecting questions with humor, irritation, or distraction. This behavior is not an indication of indifference, rather, it is a protective mechanism, a way to preserve both the secret and the appearance of normalcy. Simultaneously, she may test the relationship for signals of acceptance, attachment, or forgiveness. She may seek reassurance that she is still loved, desired, or understood, even as she withholds full emotional access. These moments of closeness are rarely accidental, they provide a sense of validation and connection without requiring complete transparency. The emotional dance becomes one of calibration. How close can she be before the risk becomes intolerable? How much warmth can she offer before vulnerability demands accountability? Each interaction becomes a negotiation, often subconscious, between desire and fear. For the partner, this behavior is bewildering. It feels inconsistent, unstable, and sometimes manipulative, though it is often a natural human response to a fractured internal state. The oscillation can trigger anxiety, confusion, and self-doubt, as the partner struggles to interpret signals that are deeply entwined with secrecy, shame, and desire. At the same time, these fluctuations reflect the humanity of someone grappling with profound internal conflict, the simultaneous longing for connection and the instinct to protect oneself when intimacy could expose truth. Ultimately, this paradox highlights the deep complexity of human relationships. Desire, loyalty, guilt, and self-preservation do not exist in neat categories. They overlap, collide, and produce behaviors that defy simple explanation. In the aftermath of betrayal, the need for closeness does not disappear, nor does the instinct to withdraw. Both coexist, creating a dynamic that is at once fragile, revealing, and deeply instructive about the hidden emotional landscapes that lie beneath everyday interactions.